Our guest today is the first woman to serve as executive director of the Illinois Tollway in its 57-year history. She oversees the management and operation of the 286-mile tollway system, serving more than 1.4 million daily users across 12 counties in northern Illinois. Prior to joining the tollway, our guest today oversaw the economic development and transportation initiatives for Governor Pat Quinn, including responsibility for overseeing Illinois' stimulus plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director of the Illinois Tollway, Kristi Lafleur. Kristi?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jay. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today and for you inviting me here today. And the City Club just presents such an amazing forum to talk about the important issues that are really facing Chicago and, frankly, Illinois, and we appreciate your leadership on that. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize a couple of individuals and people who are here today. First and foremost, I want to recognize the staff and leadership of the Tollway, past and present, who's here today. You have made the agency what it is today, and your hard work and the nights and weekends that you spend with the agency really mean a great deal to me personally in my new role and have really benefited the people of Illinois tremendously, so thank you for your hard work. And I also want to recognize our board of directors. We have several of our board members here today. Jim Rolfe, Mayor Pradle from Naperville, and as mentioned, Bill Morris are all here today. And they, along with our chair, Paula Wolf, who could not be here, she actually had a planned family trip this week, much deserved, frankly. So really helped make the agency what it is, and your dedication has helped create a vision for the future of transportation in Illinois. I also want to recognize some members of the strategic advisory team that are here today. I convened a strategic advisory team shortly after I took this position in April of this year, and convened 33 leaders from all walks of life who really dedicated an incredible amount of time to the tollway over the summer. I mean, summer meetings, are you kidding me? A couple of hours at a stretch to talk about a vision and a future for the Illinois Tollway. It was a tremendous effort on their part. And if you wouldn't mind, standing or raising your hands, I'd really like to acknowledge you and your hard work. Thank you, everybody who is here today. Thank you. More people raising their hands than standing. We understand that. But thank you for your candor and your guidance, and copies of their recommendations, which were released at the beginning of October, are available here today on your way out if you'd like to grab them, or on our website. So, the last time, as mentioned, that I came here to speak, I was speaking on behalf of the governor's office in my role in running the stimulus for the state. And now, of course, I return as executive director of the Illinois Tollway. In August of 2009, Governor Quinn appointed Paula Wolf as the first woman chair of our board of directors. And in turn, that board selected me to be the first woman to run the agency on a day-to-day basis. And let me tell you, this isn't your father's tollway. This is the new tollway, one that must be innovative in addressing the needs and challenges that we face in the future. And since 1958, our agency has changed tremendously. What was once a bypass for truck traffic around the city of Chicago now carries 1.4 million users every day. Who can imagine Illinois without the tollway? And since those early days, the tollway has seen the proliferation of automobiles, the advent of the interstate trucking system, on-time delivery, the growth of the suburbs. Those are tremendous changes for any agency to take on. The evolution of our transportation needs and our current business model really boils down to one question, and it's the question that I'm going to be addressing here today. What if you ran a business with unlimited demand for your product, but you could not just build more supply? Now, I'm sure that the business leaders who are here in this room today, that's a dream for you. Economics 101, unambiguous demand for your product. But the issue is, how can we manage supply? That's the unique and complex challenge that we at the Illinois Tollway face every day. There's a limit to how many roads we can build, how much pavement we can put down, and there should be. There's a limit not just due to the constraints of financial resources, that certainly plays a role, but there's a limit because we know that we cannot build our way out of congestion. And congestion costs this region billions of dollars. Some reports put that estimate at $7.3 billion annually, the cost of congestion to the Chicago and Northeast regional economy. And we know that when we add capacity to deal with that congestion, when we add a lane to our system, that capacity is taken up within 10 years' time. So roads, for the sake of having more roads, is not the answer to this unique challenge. And the governor and our chair and our board have been very clear on this issue from the beginning. We will not contribute to urban sprawl. We will not build roads and bridges to nowhere. We will develop innovative solutions to meet the transportation demands of our region. Our vision needs to be forward-looking, and it does not define transportation solely as roadways. It's a visionary look at 21st century transportation that must include all different modes of transportation, rail, buses, transit, freight on our system, and innovative solutions to control congestion and provide additional capacity on our system without necessarily always building more roads. Investing in transportation projects must not only offer a way to access jobs and opportunities, of course that's important, but we must think about the investments that we make as creating jobs and opportunities for the people in our region. Public transit needs to be considered in all highway projects and the development of those projects in the development phase, not retrofitted to fit in at the end. We need to plan differently for the challenges that we're going to face in the years to come. And the future of the tollway requires us to look beyond our own system and think differently about our role and how we perform it. That's my challenge as a new leader in this agency, and one that I'm happy to take on. Last April, when I created the strategic advisory team, comprised of this diverse array of people from hospitality and tourism and labor and transportation and planning groups and business groups and some environmental groups that were suing the tollway 10 years ago, it was really to help them help us set a plan for our future and create strategies and partnerships with an agency that was going to face and tackle challenges as we'd never faced and tackled them before. And these are some of the challenges that the strategic advisory team was asked to consider for us. How can we ensure that we're meeting the demand for roads and projected traffic increase 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now? How can we increase collaboration among transportation agencies, leading rather than following? And what role should the tollway play in our regional economy, now and in the future? And here's what they found. First, they said to us, Tollway, you need to be a builder of the economy, not just a builder of roads. You need to be innovative in your approach and maximize the existing assets that you have. You have to create partnerships that make any new project a reality, or in order to make any new project a reality. And you've got to change the way you do business so that the public can have the confidence that every decision that you make is for the right reason. Future transportation projects take decades to build and cost billions and billions of dollars. And China and India are spending billions and billions of dollars on their infrastructure. The US spends at most 2.6% of our GDP on infrastructure compared to China, who invests 9 to 12%. So we have a challenge to face in keeping up with our global competitors. And the future health of our economy will certainly be predicated on how good is our infrastructure. We're currently wrapping up the $5.8 billion congestion relief program, Open Roads for a Faster Future, started by one of my predecessors, Jack Hartman. We've accomplished a lot, including rebuilding and widening 120 miles of our roadways and the recent completion of the south extension of I-355, another project that was decades in the making. And we've completed that system-wide conversion to open road tolling, which makes the tollway the largest open road system in the country, and frankly, much more popular here locally in the Chicagoland area. But I want to be clear about this, that it's that innovation, that decision to move toward open road tolling that has done more than any project in the last 10 and probably 20 years to relieve congestion in the Chicagoland area. And it's that type of innovative thinking that we're going to need to continue in order to build a system for the future. We cannot rest on our laurels. We cannot sit back in maintenance mode. We need to continue to be creative, and that's what I'm here to do. The Strategic Advisory Team developed many recommendations, but chief among them was the need to maximize the tollway's infrastructure, as I discussed previously. So how does the tollway do that? Well, one way to do that is to think about innovative ways to control congestion that's about more than just building new lanes. In a recent survey, 60% of our customers said that they use the tollway because it's the fastest way for them to get to and from their destination. Pretty intuitive. You probably could all ask me, why did you need to even do a survey to find that out? But I do think it provides a lens through which we should view every infrastructure decision that we make. And earlier this year, the Metropolitan Planning Council published a report in cooperation with CMAP that indicated that one thing that we can do to think creatively about how to manage all this traffic that we have in the region is to think about congestion pricing. And one of the roads that they selected that could have some opportunity for congestion pricing is one of the tollways roads, the Jane Addams or the I-90 corridor. And simply put, for those in the room who don't know what congestion pricing is, and I know I'm talking to a transportation audience here, but congestion pricing is basically charging different rates depending on what time of day that you travel. So there are peak times and there are off-peak times, and rates are charged depending on what the traffic flow is at those times of the day. So it's new, at least new to this region, and it will certainly have its detractors. But new times and new circumstances and new challenges demand that we come up with new solutions. And congestion pricing has proved to be an effective tool to reduce congestion in other parts of the world and in other parts of our country. So according to the report, here's an example of the type of savings and the type of innovation that we can expect if we were to deploy congestion pricing on the tollway system. Many of you take that trip from Elgin to O'Hare or some component of it every day or every week or at some point in time. And I think you can all attest to the fact that that trip during peak travel times takes over an hour to get from one place to another. According to that report, to implement congestion pricing on that portion of the trip would mean that we would reduce that trip time from over an hour to just under half an hour. Now, even if the savings was not that significant in the time, we have to be realistic that that is a tremendous savings. And for us as an agency to ignore a new tool like that to manage congestion and think about handling the traffic on our system, it would be irresponsible for us. So for the tollway, the idea of congestion pricing is tremendously relevant. It's something that we'll certainly be looking at in the years to come, and as we plan for our future and the projects that we'll be putting forth in the years to come. The Strategic Advisory Team agreed that congestion pricing was important, and the tollway must pursue a variety of creative ways, including this one, to manage congestion pricing and congestion on our system. But again, the key is that we maximize our existing assets to meet the demand for efficient travel now and in the future. Businesses in private sector are already stepping up with new and innovative ways of doing that. Many of us telecommute, or carpool incentives are available through local companies. So we all have a role to play here in making sure we're getting the most out of our infrastructure. And reducing congestion doesn't necessarily imply that we won't build new roads. Of course, that won't happen. We'll always build new roads, and we'll always continue to build infrastructure in the greater Chicagoland area and across the country, and we should. But we need to think innovatively about not only tools to manage congestion, but transit on the system, other components that need to play a role, thinking more holistically about how we develop a transportation infrastructure here. So as I've said, the future of the tollway requires that we look beyond our system. And that means that we need to cooperate more and partner more with local communities. In metropolitan Chicago, there are 380 separate governments that are responsible for designing and managing transportation in one way, shape, or form. That's mind-boggling. Municipalities, counties, and the state must all make major decisions about a system that serves millions of people every day for a wide variety of reasons. And if we're not working together in making those decisions, we're going to suffer in the long run. The Tollway recognizes that we have an opportunity not only to work with these local governments, but to be a leader in helping to make some of those decisions. But in order to be a good leader, we have to be a good partner. And that's why the Tollway is serving as co-chair of Governor Quinn's recently announced Elgin O'Hare West Bypass Advisory Council. This is an incredibly important project for our region, and the Tollway is looking very closely at this as we think about our plans and development for the future. Governor Quinn announced this council at the beginning of October. And he convened not only the Tollway and the Illinois Department of Transportation, who you would naturally think would be partners on a project like that, but leaders from local government. I see some of the council members here today even, leaders from business, leaders from regional planning organizations and transit organizations, labor leaders, public finance experts. We had our first meeting last week, and I'm pleased to say that a few of those, as I mentioned, a few of those members of the council are here today. And I think that working together, the Tollway has an opportunity to help see this important project become a reality in our region in one way, shape, or form. Again, the Tollway Board is looking at this project, and there are lots of decisions that still need to be made in the context of how this project fits in the overall system for our infrastructure. But it's a prime example of what the Tollway's approach should be to every new project, and that is that we always need to think about partnerships. We always need to think about bringing a diverse group of people to the table in planning for any new infrastructure. The Elgin O'Hare West Bypass is something that's been on the table regionally for at least the last 40 years. And I'm sure I'm not the first person who has come and spoken to this audience or at the City Club about the Elgin O'Hare West Bypass, and probably won't end up being the last either. But it is an important project for us. This is a 21st century project. We have modernization happening at O'Hare Airport, major investments taking place, and we need the 21st century intermodal capabilities and business infrastructure in order to support that regional asset. And the impact of this project could be huge for us, but it has a huge price tag as well. Current estimates put it at about $3.6 billion. It will create jobs in the region, 21,000 construction jobs, 60,000 permanent jobs, but it's still a massive undertaking and a significant investment. Make no mistake about it, this project has been in the works for decades for a reason, and that's because there are a lot of challenges. Think about what it takes to get a project like this built. Planning, engineering studies, the community outreach, the right-of-way acquisition, the gargantuan tasks for procurement. I mean, all of these are massive undertakings just in and of themselves. But how do we pay for it is the question that we really need to tackle. It's not really even worth thinking about all those other things unless you know you've got a way to pay for it. And thanks to the governor's leadership and our work with the Advisory Council, we're going to be exploring all of those funding options to facilitate regional consensus and think creatively about how we can build this infrastructure. At the Tollway, we know that a project of this magnitude cannot be funded in just one way or by just one source. The challenge with this and other major new projects, frankly, is that we need to be creative about what resources actually exist to pay for them, but also creative about what resources could be tapped to pay for them. We can't accept, oh, we've never done it that way before, when we think about funding and financing projects of this magnitude. We simply don't have the resources to make all of the investments that we need to make in our infrastructure, and we need to think creatively about what else needs to be brought to the table to make them a reality. The council's been tasked with this important pursuit, how to figure out how to fund this project, but they've also been tasked with things like how are we going to really maximize the economic impact of a project like this, maximize the job creation that everybody says is going to happen as a result of this project. How are we making sure that we're planning for that and that we're creating a reality around that? We also have been working to think and will work to creatively address how diversity plays a role in a project like this. We need to make sure that workforce and vendors of all walks have access to, important opportunities and the important financial resources and opportunities that will be made available as a result of this critical investment. And if project financing is resolved, and if our board decides to take it on, the Tollway could begin work on this as early as 2013. Again, it's a lot of ifs, a lot of questions still remain. But that's a very ambitious timeline, but it can be done, and it can only be done by bringing together partners and cooperating in a way that, frankly, we haven't on a major infrastructure project before. But if the Tollway or any public agency is going to be entrusted with making those big investments in our future, it's going to be entrusted with making sure that large projects like that can happen in this region, we must make sure that we have the public confidence in order to do it. Through public-private collaboration and with the leadership of our board, we must transform the way we as an agency do business, and that means being responsive not only to our customers' needs and working to gain their trust, but we need to make sure that they understand why we make the decisions that we make and why we're taking the action that we're taking. It's about restoring confidence in our government and our agency and changing the culture of a large, complex organization. Enhancing transparency and accountability is a big part of that. In July, Governor Quinn signed into law legislation that creates the first independent Inspector General for the Tollway. This new Inspector General will investigate any claims of wrongdoing from staff or management or other leadership at the organization. And I think it really creates a model for how public agencies need to handle their oversight and internal oversight of their operations. Earlier this month, the governor appointed Jim Wagner to fill that important role for us. And his long history as a leader and in investigating and his integrity in his work with the FBI and in taking on important anti-corruption efforts in Chicago speak for themselves, and I think make him a perfect person for this role. Again, we want to make sure that everyone can have 100% confidence in everything that we do at all times. And as I said, transparency and accountability needs to start at the top. So where the leadership of our agency needs to walk the walk and talk the talk. And so at the Tollway, under the leadership of our board and our chair, we've initiated a more transparent discussion about all the projects that we're going to be undertaking, to really put into the public sphere the debate and the conversation about what needs to be on the Tollway's agenda in the future. So whether it be Elgin O'Hare, whether it be the Route 53 extension up into Lake County, whether it be our own investments in our existing infrastructure, people can come to our board meeting and there's an open and vibrant discussion. Those meetings are webcast. There's nothing that happens behind closed doors. And I think that our board and frankly myself and the leadership of the agency have benefited tremendously from that open dialogue and hearing those perspectives and opinions and voices and that have been able to inform our decision making, and I think created the kind of dialogue that needs to happen around major public projects. As I mentioned, the Strategic Advisory Team's report is not going to be allowed to gather dust on a shelf. It's available for you today, but we're going to be reconvening our group in 12 months so that they can hear about the progress that we've made toward implementing some of their recommendations in that tremendous report. The team's final challenge to us is going to be hold us accountable for what we promised to do for you. And as we work to implement those recommendations that were included in the report, we have a basis for which to plan strategically for our future, for the region's future, for our agency's future, and for our economy's future. The issues that we face aren't new, but our approach to them really needs to be. Thank you very much. Look forward to your questions.
Come up. Come on up. As I mentioned, he served as in the General Assembly as a senator, and now he's on the Tollway board. Served as Mayor of Waukegan. He's going to do the questions and answers. So if you'd send up your questions to Mayor Bill Morris. Bill?
First of all, I want to acknowledge Kirk here. One of the cool things about the board, the year I've been on it, and you guys when we had our hearings, is it's truly been bipartisan and nonpartisan the last year, and it's amazing how much we've gotten done. And I thank you and the other people in the Senate for giving us that opportunity. It's been great. All right, I've got 3 questions here already from people at my table, of course. We've got to have a few more, so send them up. Lawrence Masal, my good friend out here from the Civic Federation, asks a very difficult question. Is it true or not true that Bill Morris is the best looking? No, I'm sorry. How does the recently announced St. Louis high-speed rail and Continental, help me out, the continued CTA crisis impact on the long-range plans for the tollway?
Okay. Well, I think that we need to, as I mentioned, we need to plan for transit on new elements of our system, and we need to cooperate regionally with other transportation agencies. The CTA funding crisis and the challenge that public transit faces in funding generally, I think, need to be something that we factor into our future, as I mentioned, our future planning on highway projects. So when we're thinking about new roads, and the Elgin O'Hare is one example, but certainly even our own planning for the Jane Addams and ultimately the reconstruction of I-90, need to plan for transit on those corridors, and part of that needs to be how to pay for that transit, how to pay for building that transit, but also supporting it. High-speed rail, I think, clearly high-speed rail is something that the governor has expressed his interest in and commitment to, and Illinois is, I know, working quickly to implement high-speed rail, and I worked on that when I was in the governor's office. Ultimately, I think that we need to, as we're thinking about siting our interchanges or siting our roadways, we need to also think about how we're coordinating some of that with, whether it be, rail, intercity rail like high-speed rail, or transit, or, even freight on our system. We need to be thinking about locations of interchanges that make sense with the siting of stations or other improvements.
Kind of a similar follow-up question from Lois Scott. What role does the tollway play in helping reduce traffic and traffic congestion by alternative transportation options? You did touch on that a bit.
Yeah, I think that it's really important for us to be a more active player in this in the future, and our board and certainly Bill, has emphasized this as well as other board members. We cannot, as I mentioned, we cannot just keep building additional roadways to handle all of our congestion. So we're going to need to look at transit. We're going to need to make sure that we're planning for it along our corridors and on our system. And that planning needs to be how to pay for it. Because you can't plan for it and just create kind of the envelope for it without thinking about how to pay for it. So if we don't make those plans, if we don't think about transit when we're planning for new highways or new roadways, then I think we are doomed to constantly being, playing catch up on the congestion that, creates problems for our regional economy. So we need to be proactive in planning for it, and I think it needs to play a big part of what we do and for what we do in the future.
Okay, now this is near and dear to my heart since I just turned 65. Would we consider free rides for seniors on the tollway as a good idea? I won't tell you who wrote that question.
I see actually that there's not a name on that question, Director Morris.
And it's not my handwriting because I can't write, I print. So.
We might have to make you the head of that committee to explore.
I can answer that one, no.
Okay, there you go. Now, you've heard it here first.
In fact, we should take away the other senior free rides, but that's another story. This from Bill Seath. Won't congestion pricing just push tollway traffic to already congested side streets without more total capacity? How would congestion pricing ever solve the problem? Isn't it just a way to justify price increases in order to generate more revenue?
Well, the congestion pricing that we're looking at for the Jane Addams corridor would actually be implemented potentially as we reconstruct that corridor and add a lane anyway. So we're not necessarily looking at congestion pricing across all of the traffic or all the lanes of traffic, but a single congestion price lane there. We have not found that, or at least the early study of it from the Metropolitan Planning Council did not necessarily find that it pushed traffic off onto other roadways, because there still are the conventionally priced lanes available for traffic, but that in fact it did improve travel times not only in the congestion price lane, but for the other lanes as well. And some of that is because you are adding a lane of capacity, but you're giving people an incentive potentially to travel at different times of the day. So, it's something that I think we'd be irresponsible not to be looking at and potentially planning for as we're thinking about reconstructing that corridor anyway. And it certainly deserves, a little bit more study in order for us to make a decision about it, but we'll be working with our board on that in the coming months.
Thank you. Kirk, I have to bite my tongue every time wanting to jump in here and answer some of these questions. This is from Phil Minga. What is your opinion on the use of design-build in Illinois and that's for the engineers in the room. The rest of us might not know what that means. So.
Well, leave it to somebody from Jacobs Engineering to ask about a design-build question. You know, it's clearly something a lot of systems across the country are looking at it. It's something that I think as we look at public-private partnerships and explore whether they, you know, are something that we want to be pursuing for any one piece of infrastructure or generally, you know, it's clearly something that we may need to look at implementing in the state. I think that we have to decide what the applicability of public-private partnerships are in our system before a major change like that could be made.
Okay, this is from Steve Schlickman, recently retired, and now Schlickman and Associates. Steve is one of our real transportation geniuses around here. What is the status of the I-90 Star Line project?
Excellent question. The I-90 Star Line project, as you know, is one of Metra's, I think, top 4 priorities for the region, and the Tollway's been working closely to see how it could possibly be accommodated. We are getting to the point where, you know, we need to make some decisions on reconstruction of I-90, and the Star Line, while I know there's a lot of public support for it, I think does suffer from what many big infrastructure projects in the region suffer from, which is how are we going to pay for it? And so, you know, we'll certainly want to continue to work with Metra on that project, but there may be other options for transit on that corridor, and we are exploring those, whether they be bus rapid transit or, you know, other opportunities for transit along the same line that may be a step in the right direction and may present an opportunity for a more near-term implementation.
Kirk, you've been around a long time. I served with Steve's dad in the legislature, and now Steve's retired, so that's scary. This is from Chris Newkirk, and before I say these words, these are not my words. I would be in favor of a toll increase. Any chance of that happening? Now, if I ever decide to run for office again, Kirk, that phrase I just said will become clearly a TV commercial.
Well, I hope that what I'm about to say doesn't become a TV commercial. So I think that, you know, we're working with our board now to examine all of the projects that are on the horizon for the Tollway. And clearly one of the big challenges that we're going to face is once we do prioritize those projects, how are we going to pay for them? I think that we need to make sure that the agency's operations are running as effectively and efficiently as possible. We've taken steps to make sure that our electronic tolling system to collect those tolls and follow up on violations for violators on our system. We're making improvements there to make sure that we're collecting all of the revenue that we should already be collecting. And I think that we need to take those steps and make those improvements before we can start talking about going out to our customers and asking for more money. I just don't think that that's something that I'm comfortable with or our board will be comfortable with until we can have some confidence that our own operations are running as efficiently as possible to go out and ask for additional revenues from our customers. Seems like something that would be an irresponsible thing to do.
Are there any other questions? Jay, if not, would you let Paul Green, who was one of my professors, know that I did an okay job? Okay, thank you very much.